Good evening.
Good evening. I would like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the special meeting for the City Council for District 1 candidate selection. Would you please rise for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance? Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just thank you for bringing us together this evening. This is a very important decision that this council has to make. And so, Father, I just pray that you would give us wisdom and insight beyond our own ability. And we just ask for your direction in this endeavor. Thank you for this evening. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Member Olson?
Present.
Member Barentine?
Present.
Member Cuesta?
Present.
Member Martinez?
Present.
Member Wink?
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell?
Present.
All 6 present.
Thank you. And so this is the only agenda item that we can cover tonight, District 1 vacancy candidate selection. And so I will open up the floor. If we need to have any more process discussion about how we want to go tonight, that would be great. Councilmember Wink.
If we have no other suggestions, certainly if we have suggestions, I'd like to consider this one. We used certain criteria to evaluate these candidates beforehand. We came to a 3-3 split. I think that it would be good for us to perhaps in some of the areas, some of the metrics by which we were evaluating these candidates to define more what these areas of, what these metrics really meant. How how we were all defining those metrics, and perhaps we can, if we are not to do anything further but deliberate, perhaps we can earmark or bring out a certain few metrics of evaluative quality that we absolutely need in this candidate, and define what it means to all of us, because it's rare that in a group like this, or in many groups, you find that all of us are defining, for example, dedication to the city the same way. It's rare that we're all defining the same metrics the same way, and so if we can identify a few metrics that we think are the top ones that we want to see in this candidate, perhaps if we can identify those quickly, then maybe quickly come to a definition of what that really means for us. Might be tough, but I don't think it should be tough with us. We're all intelligent, so we can come to definitions on those and then use that, and maybe then have that criteria and use that final criteria to evaluate our final four, the four that we named on that Monday. If that doesn't work for everyone, I have also in the back of my mind the idea to offer one more opportunity to see the candidates, maybe just the four that we named on that Monday. Not everyone. If you all want everyone, I'm certainly open to that, but in the interest of time and energy and cost, we all named four and we were split on four. So if what I said before doesn't work, perhaps we could have a quick forum and pose questions to the final four, questions they won't know in advance, questions that the citizens pose, citizens of District 1. We can deliberate whether we want other citizens from other districts to contribute to that, but maybe offer them one more opportunity to show what they know, what they don't know, how they prepare, how well they see their role with constituents, how they represent the city, A to Z, in terms of what we might be looking for in another form different than what we've seen before, to just offer another evaluative option. So that's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
Just before we get started, because we had the issue in study session regarding the contact of a candidate with the city clerk, what the city clerk said, and then if we could go ahead and make sure that anybody who's had exposure or contact with any of the candidates can make sure that we have an opportunity to expose or explain that, or at least bring that up in public so that we are all up front. Because that happened in a study session. I would prefer we begin this meeting with at least that piece of it so that we understand where we're at.
Councilmember Cuesta.
To immediately address that matter, with transparency being so prioritized and critical throughout this process, I received an email from Mr. Sierra on Friday afternoon. He asked if we could meet to, I think, just further converse. I informed him that council had reached the conclusion that there would be no further communications past our interviews concluding, and that was the end of my communication with him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wink.
So Mr. Sierra reached out and indicated that he was told that that at this time he could talk with all council members, and then I think minutes later found out that we couldn't. It was a really quick turnaround, and so I did talk to him and said, "Really, is that really true?" And he said yes, and we didn't talk about anything, but he said yes. Apparently, we can now speak with council and offer. He was clear from city staff that the candidates could maybe talk and answer unanswered questions, provide more information that wasn't previously offered. He and I certainly didn't get into any of that, but he told me that, and I said, okay, that's great. Okay, good. And then I think, I know what it was. Shortly after that, and I saw the email and the communication, so I told him that, and so that was that. He came to my Wink Talk, my monthly series of meetings for citizens on Saturday. We had no conversation about anything. I barely talked to him, first of all. I said, hello, and thank you for coming, and the citizens were all happily engaged with one another, but he was there, so I want to say that in total transparency. He attended that meeting. It was on the ABCs of ADUs, but I didn't talk to him. I didn't talk to him at all, certainly about any of this. So thank you.
Thank you. Actually, before I call in Councilmember Barentine, because I want to give opportunities to other council members to speak first. Councilmember Olson?
I've had no contact with any of the candidates since the beginning of this interviewing process.
Councilmember Martinez?
I also have had no contact with any of the candidates since we agreed to not speak with them as soon as we got their applications. I haven't had no contact.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Barentine?
In the public meeting, in the open public forum, while I was looking for something, somebody asked me a question. I realized it was Carson Green, and I answered his question as to, did council take a lot of time? And I said, yes. While I was looking for my business card to give to the pastor, the mayor came up, and then that conversation ended, and I moved on. And then Andrea Mannion walked in to the Inglewood Grand while my son and I were having dinner, and they left, and I apologized to the owner for chasing away his business. The only other question, because I ran into somebody who had attended the meeting, and was Mr. Sierra allowed to speak at your meeting, Councilmember Wink? I mean, did he?
No,
make any kind
he
of
didn't speak at
Okay.
the meeting at all.
So he didn't.
About ADUs or anything else.
Okay.
He didn't,
I
never
just wanted
spoke. No.
All right.
That's a good question, actually.
I just wanted
No,
to make
he
sure
didn't.
that you made
Very
that
good.
clear that he wasn't
Thank you.
participating in the meeting like that.
Even outside of him running for District 1, he did not say a single word about any. Lots of citizens spoke up, but he didn't.
And then
Thank you.
the only other question I had that came up to me was that you were you made the comment during the interviews that you were the liaison for the case meeting, and that he was a member of that meeting. And then I was posed a question whether or not Mr. Sierra, whether you attended a meeting and whether Mr. Sierra was part of any of those meetings, that you were the liaison.
Excellent
kind of unofficial
question.
liaison.
Well, thank you. So I am no liaison for case. I began to go to case meetings independently because I'm interested in every issue that involves the city.
Right.
And since the District 1 interviews started, so I didn't go to that meeting.
Okay.
The meeting that happened after candidates started, I didn't go to that meeting.
And I should clarify
No.
it. There is no official liaison to that.
No, there is not.
You
but
just had jokingly said, I guess, I'm the unofficial liaison to that.
yeah,
And
I don't remember saying that, but I go because I care about all the issues, and environmental issues are one of them. And but I absolutely, that's a very good question.
Thanks for
Councilmember
clarifying that.
Barentine.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I didn't go to that last meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in just a second, I'm going to call on the city clerk. But I also, I have had no contact with any of the candidates other than when I was departing the council meeting last week and Andrea Mannion was in the back. I just told her hi, just exchanged. And I think I haven't run into anybody in the grocery store or anything, but I don't think it means being rude to people. So I appreciate this discussion, and I thank you for all of your openness. Okay, City Clerk.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that Mr. Sierra reached out to me prior to reaching out to all of you, just to make sure that it would be appropriate. And after talking with our team, I responded back that it would be okay. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows that the candidate did reach out to make sure that it would be appropriate, and I don't want this to reflect negatively on him by any means. So I own that misunderstanding, and so I just want to make sure that you all know that.
All right. I greatly appreciate that.
I have a question for the city clerk.
Okay, Councilmember
Was
Bernstein.
the fact that he reached out then, was that email then provided to all of council and all of the people, all of the candidates that applied?
The email that he asked if it would be allowed.
He sent out an email referencing that he had spoken with you that I did not see, was not sent to me individually, but I saw it from council, from the mayor that, and in there it says that I talked to the city clerk and it's okay. Was that information then passed along to all of the rest of the candidates?
No. I didn't receive that email. I think that's an email that went out to all of.
And the truth is, I don't remember what it said on the.
My only concern was that once a candidate had contact with all of us like that, I think it should have gone out to all of the candidates so that they knew what was being said, so that nobody hears that later and says, well, the city clerk told me it was okay, and I didn't want that to happen. So I had suggested that it at least go out to all of the candidates in an order for fairness.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. Again, in the interest of transparency, in that email he sent to me, he did say, I've had contact with the city clerk's office, and they said it was okay to contact you. I then replied, that wasn't my understanding. But thank you for replying, and discontinued communication after that.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
I never received an email from him. So the email that I saw was the one that Mr. Cuesta had responded, and then that got forwarded to all of us. So
Okay.
more
Thank
information.
you. And Councilmember Martinez, did you get the email or?
I did not. I only saw the forwarded email.
Okay, thank you. And I did get the email also, and that's what I sent to all of council with, just reminding us that we had agreed to no ex parte discussion. And so I thank you. Thank you for everyone for being transparent, and I think we can move forward. I don't think anything has been violated. Okay, so now other discussion about process, how to go forward. Councilmember Barentine.
The Councilmember Wink did a beautiful job of putting together a tool that she wanted to use to kind of make this evaluation. But in the piece that she said on process, it made it sound as if we had all agreed on certain matrix to do this. I mean, we can certainly try to do that this evening if that's what this council wants to do, but that has not previously been part of the process. And I was grateful for that tool. I used it as part of what my assessment piece. Appreciate it, the work you did. But it was not the, I know you're statistical and you want all the numbers to add up and do all that. I used it as a tool, but I also used other things. So this council hasn't come up with an exact, with a matrix that we were using as part of this process, but certainly appreciate what Councilmember Wink provided to all of us as a helpful tool. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, I just want to say I like the suggestion Councilmember Wink made previously at the beginning of the meeting. Maybe we talk about it in kind of bigger picture terms. What kind of qualities are we looking for, or some kind of overarching topics, I guess, that we could agree on, which we could maybe discuss the candidates underneath those kind of headlines. I liked that approach.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Councilmember Martinez, for your advocacy of that tool, and Councilmember Barentine. And just to supplement what you said, which is in total agreement with what you said, when I put together that tool and when I conduct my work as a data scientist, the numerical derivations and findings are by no means the sole decision-making content of my work, right? And my final word. And I did present that, and we've had tons of conversations, so I don't expect any of us, myself included, to remember all of that. But the tool that I presented and introduced was one facet of what I thought we could utilize to help ourselves at least categorize each candidate on the same criteria with the same scoring rubric, and then at that point, I believe firmly there's an art and science to everything, and I'm an artist and a scientist, and no more could I say that. Truly, I really do believe that once we have some numbers, at least if someone is absolutely critiquing us, we have some measure by which we can support our argument. There are numbers and there were criteria that we were using, and so I love that foundation. But at the same time, subjective knowledge and the art of and who the people are, and there's a human side to this, and so I by no means understood or expected that the numbers would be the end-all be-all. And so thank you, Councilmember Barentine. I'm glad that you thought the tool was useful, and I absolutely want us to use the tool plus our hearts and our brains and our experience and our knowledge, experiential knowledge, to come to our decision making. And so what I presented right at the start of the meeting was maybe to draw out, maybe extrapolate even 3. I think 3 is a perfect number in many facets of science. 3, I'm open to discussion always, but maybe 3 points from that, and if anyone has a better suggestion, go ahead, please, but I'm trying to help here. I thought maybe if we could pull out 3 pieces from that, maybe a little bit amended, and look at those 3 and look at our 4 final candidates to just help the conversation along. 3 things that we really find are most critical to deciding on this District 1 individual for council.
And when you suggested defining metrics, I really took it along the lines that Councilmember Martinez just shared about the qualities that we're looking for, and things like that. I think that might be a good idea, because I think what each of us are evaluating on could be totally different. Councilmember Wink.
True, and I agree. However, it is my understanding that not all 6 of us were utilizing this tool. Am I correct?
Could you define utilizing?
It is my understanding that not all 6 of us ranked all candidates with the 5-point scale for all of the categories that were listed on this tool, which would have developed a final score, of course, a final average. If we were using the Google Doc, there was an easy, I'd built in a simple, anybody can do this, but just a simple average score, and then it was easy for me to see, for example, and everybody else. So I wasn't sure that everybody was actually plugging in the 1 to 5 score for each candidate based on each of the criteria points. Were we all doing that? Did we all do that? We did.
Hold on.
I've got mine here. Now, again,
Excellent.
I wouldn't want this to be my sole definer. I might have weighted some of the things different, not
Sure.
1 to 5 on all. I mean, some might have been more 7, maybe some were 3. So I certainly have variables on this. I thought it was a good guide as well, but it seems as everybody's described one of many components that we're applying to this decision. But yes, certainly, I've got mine in front of me as well.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, to answer her question, yes, I did use it, but it's not something that I'm going to share, because it's the piece that went into, it was part of a pie.
Don't want you to share it. Just didn't know if we all 6 used it. That's all.
Okay.
Don't want to share. I don't think we should share. I just didn't know if we all 6 used it.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, I was going to say I did use mine as well, and for me it was helpful just to rate on the specific questions. I think it was helpful for me to kind of look at it at that kind of granular level, because obviously some of the candidates are better at some answers than others, so it was nice to have the average there. So thank you, Councilmember Wink, for putting that together. But I think what I understand is being discussed is maybe using this as one part of our decision, but also talking about maybe taking out qualities or characteristics separate from this document or matrix that we used, and looking at it from that angle as opposed to totally independent of this matrix.
Councilmember Olson.
I thought that's what Councilmember Wink was suggesting too, but maybe I misunderstood you, so I don't know. I did sort of, I used the tool too. I found it helpful. And as always, the things kind of blend together for me, but then they start to help me sort through. It's kind of a forced choice at some point, and that's sometimes what's most helpful to me about using a tool like that. So this weekend I was thinking about what are some of the core things that I'm trying to get out of all of these other, out of the questions, and I did write down some things that I thought would be helpful to think of in a broader way, but I don't know if that's another way to approach it. It's just one more way to have to think about it, and that's not useful. I don't know, but it helped me again realize, okay, so on this, and this, I think this candidate would be better, and this, and this, But it's based on what they told us, not on anything else. So I don't know how other people were reviewing what they heard and saw in the written narratives and applications that we received.
And I did use the tool that you gave us. Certainly when I was taking notes on my paper, I was rating some of the things. And so with me, it's kind of a pie also. I rated it on things they said, on interactions they've had with the city. So I'm... do we have consensus to move forward in one direction? I mean, I kind of felt that they kind of tied together, but if we're defining different things differently, Councilmember Wink.
So I like your question, Mayor Pro Tem Russell. What is the way to move forward, for which you would like consensus on moving forward?
I think let's start out with, I was assuming that what you were saying was kind of like what Councilmember Martinez was saying about, defining qualities that we were looking for, not, in general, and overarching characteristics. I think that would help us perhaps see why we all came up with somebody different. That's a possibility. So, any other thoughts? Councilmember
like that.
Wink. Thank you.
So just as a point of clarification on that, we are still more in the characteristics that we appreciate as opposed to the people holding those characteristics. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's
We're
what
still not
I'm...
getting into this is who we like.
Right.
We're getting into this is what I like.
That's right. That's what I'm seeing it. Councilmember Martinez.
I was going to say, in hindsight, it probably would have been beneficial to outline these characteristics prior to everything else, so we had that to measure against. But here we are. So I think it couldn't hurt to do that part now, and then
right.
match it up and see who fits.
I agree. Hindsight is always 20/20. Councilmember Barentine.
I think that's exactly what we did in the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Let Councilmember Barentine go ahead and finish, and then.
Well, it's recorded. I want to make sure that. I think that's exactly what we did, and I thought Councilmember Olson did a beautiful job of, and along with Councilmember Martinez participated in this. We all had the discussion with what the quality, motivation, vision, the kind of more about them and character and competencies were all very discussed a lot, and we came up with the categories that we thought our question should be, and that's exactly what the questions were based off of. So how we scored people one way or the other, whether I used 20 years of experience and 6 years on council, I want to weigh that in along with whatever other tool I did. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings in that it wasn't the only tool I used, and I appreciated that as being piece of it. But I think we did a beautiful job of coming together as a team and saying we want to cover these areas. We want to cover social, environmental issues. We want to cover what they think about the budget. We want to cover about what they think about the time and responsibility. And I think those character issues came out in here, and I think this would be a good role for us to use, that we've already done that. I don't think we bypassed that. I think it's in this document that we used for the questioning and that we made available to the public.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wink.
Thankfully, Councilmember Barentine echoed a lot of what I was going to say. I think we did cover characteristics, our rubric in this evaluative tool, and whatever else we were discussing afterward in the meetings was absolutely not exclusive of personal characteristics, professional characteristics. I mean, we were looking at, I don't want to belabor the point, but we got everything. We were very diligent in what we looked at. Demonstration about learning about the issues, understanding of District 1, decision-making, how they can handle conflict, understanding of city and personal goals. I mean, all of the criteria by which we were evaluating these candidates certainly took a very strong stance in evaluating their personal characteristics. So I do feel very strongly that we absolutely looked at that in great detail. I think even we were evaluating personal competencies and characteristics, maybe not in explicitly in the statement and the question we were asking, but in the questioning and in what we were driving and finding out and what we learned about the characteristics of each applicant. So I think we did grab at that very, very well, and I think we learned a lot of that of all candidates, and especially the final four, very well. I would love it if we can narrow down to maybe 3 of, we all liked deciding on 6 questions. Thank you, Member Olson, for doing all your fantastic work. I mean, we all did work on it, and we all tended toward your questioning and your rubric for evaluating. And so within that, I think if we can narrow down, as you mentioned even before, to 2 or 3 questions. I'm only asking for 2 or 3 questions. I feel like we're all in agreement. So 2 or 3 questions, maybe derived from these 6 that we had before, maybe with, do you have a question, City Manager Keck? Are you stretching? Okay. Such that we can then move forward with that. I think we're aligned pretty well. There was something else I wanted to say, but I'll remember it a little later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
So when I was trying to figure out, okay, why did I do what I did on mine and other people using the same rubric and sort of content areas came up with different things. And so independently of what our rubric was, I wrote down things and then promptly left it at home, but I rewrote them here. And I have several things. It's more than 3. But if I were to pick the 3 that probably seemed more salient to me were one would be the breadth of engagement over time in the city, or that did influence me. That a higher level of independence to think for themselves, and that was impacting me. And then the approach to conflict in groups and the energy and sort of attitude that seemed to bring to that seemed really important to me as well. There are other things, like I think I realized I was picking up on energy and optimism from people, understanding of District 1, which is one of the content areas, approachable communication style, the seriousness of the written application in particular, I found was influencing me. So those are some of the influencers. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you. Councilmember Wink?
So in terms of how I evaluate and how I've learned to evaluate different scenarios and different situations, of course, the variance is often more important than the norm and the middle and the average. And what I thought about our top 6 questions was I saw a lot of variance in terms of the answers. So the question about knowledge and understanding of what District 1 was, what challenges District 1 had or has, and how to approach that. And among the candidates, I was pretty stunned about the variation in responses. More so stunned about the levels of understanding of District 1 and what's happening there, what it is even. And so I would really love to introduce that as something, a criteria from which we previously introduced to the candidates so that we can maybe take forward. It seemed to not be so easy for all of them, and so I'd like to introduce that.
Thank you.
Do you need clarification, Mayor Pro Tem Russell? I can say more.
Actually, I think that is, these are some good ideas. I liked the questions that Councilmember Olson shared and the one you shared on their understanding of District 1 and which tied to all of this. I mean, we can discuss this. I think what is happening, all of this is really subjective also in how each of us evaluated each of these characteristics. So any suggestions?
Can you say more? I'm sorry, you didn't call me.
Councilmember Wink.
I beg your pardon. I don't want to be out of order. Mayor Pro Tem, so you feel that this is a subjective process to the moment. Do you mind saying more about what you don't like and what you like, or what you don't see that you would like to see in the process so far?
No, actually, I have seen everything that I needed to see. I do believe that these questions were very good, that they revealed where people stood. But in subjective, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but all six of us have different life experiences, different ways that we evaluate things that are totally that are more important to us perhaps than other things. And so there is a level here that cannot be totally numerical. And I may not be explaining it properly, but if we all evaluated everything the same way, we would have come out with the top person and we wouldn't have had to have any discussions. So that is what I'm saying. Let me call on Councilmember Cuesta and then I'll come back.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fair.
Thank you. And some of this does feel like covered ground. This process has been ongoing for some time. We did decide what qualities we like, what questions we want to pose towards these candidates, how we're going to carry out the process. We had our last study session in which we really danced around who we liked, why we liked them. We couldn't get specific until we came into here. And we had, I believe, 2 hours carved out, and we were behind on our agenda. So we left it at, I like these three people, I like these three people, and then we walked out of the room. I was under the impression we were maybe going to pick up there and say, this is where we left off. These are the three people I liked, 2 people I liked, 4 people I liked, and here's why. I feel like we're kind of taking a step back now and reevaluating what are the qualities we're looking for in people. I could be off the mark on that. I'm happy to explore again what are the qualities we're looking for, but I thought we had made it to that next step where we're really ready to start discussing candidates and why we like candidates.
Okay, so you are suggesting right now that we take the candidates our top 2 candidates that we came up with and explain what we liked about them. Or am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
Yes, I thought that's one format to go about it. I thought we were at the point where we're getting to the specifics of the candidates and why we thought that they would be a good fit up here.
Okay.
I may have misread that, and I
No.
That's the case.
I appreciate that, the specifics of each candidate. All right, Council Member Barentine. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's true. Or Wink.
It was Council Member Wink, and then Council Member Barentine.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So, to what you said about us all evaluating the candidates and based on our own individual experiences, rating the scale based on those differences and coming to different outcomes, I have to say in measurement theory we have psychometrics and there are always independent variables. In statistics, this is a basic. Maybe you choose a ruler to measure people's height. And say 6 of us decide we're going to use a ruler, or measuring stick, a big ruler, right, with wood. We're going to put it here, and we're going to have everyone stand feet against the thing. But that's our measuring device, and we understand and agree to the variances between each notch on the ruler, the centimeters, the et cetera, and our understanding of whether we're taking shoes off, and maybe Manager Keck has really thick socks on, and Amy has no socks on, and you have medium socks on. I mean, we have to agree on the variances by which we're going to accept those variation from our measurement and understand their error variances. So, look, we had a matrix, and we had a 5-point scale, which is the fairest scale when you look at measurement theory, the history of measurement theory, and that's what we used. It was just a piece of what we were using. It was not by any means the sole thing. However, it is understandable. There's no way, based on the 6 of us, that we're going to come with the same background and the same understanding and the same value systems. And that's what makes us an ideal council. So we don't want that. And that's what makes us rich. And that's what makes us powerful in terms of our decision-making ability together. And so I love it that 6 different people with our different experiences, different age, different life upbringing, different this, different that, different every other variable about us being so different, yet we are here sitting on this dais making these decisions. That's the beauty of this. We care. Our common denominator is caring for the betterment of the city of Englewood. And so we all want to make Englewood better. It's easy. Now, we 6, with all our differences, which are plenty, and should be plenty, because then we can challenge each other respectfully and healthfully to come to the right decision every time. So we use one tool. And I expect we should be all over the board. We happen to be 3-3 and split in the middle. But I don't downplay the fact that we're different and that we should be different. I do feel, and I think Member Cuesta was kind of getting to this, I do feel that at this point, unless I'm being just hopelessly romantically positive, I do think that the 6 of us can intelligently and respectfully to one another talk about this and get to where we're going. And I thought by removing it from the candidate name and bringing it to a point of maybe 3 factors of the candidates, when you take things above a personal level, it's easier to discuss. It tends to remove bias so much and arguments. So that's why I started out by presenting maybe we extract 3 tenets, we discuss them, we figure out, do we agree? If we agree, then we can fill in the 4 candidates on these 3 tenets. But in my experience, my 20-plus years of professional experience, when you base it on the individual, we are individuals, and the conversation has more propensity to go toward a sensitive, personal nature, and we're less objective. So that is where I was coming from.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
I was listening, and I may have just lost my train of thought because of, which is a good thing, not listening to wait till I can have my turn. So I have to think for a second. I am in favor of moving forward and talking about the candidates. My reason for bringing up some of the elements that, as I tried to mull over, where could we find some common ground, I was asking myself, why did mine turn out differently than others? And that's when I realized that there were other factors that are stronger, some within the categories, some that weren't even in the categories. And so I wanted to write those out to sort of, to out some other biases I might have or grids that I'm using that I was unaware of before. So that's why I wanted to put these in there. And so really the one on conflict, we did ask about conflict. We did ask about what they want to see changed in the city, what they like, what they don't. So almost all of these relate to it, but they're just saying it a little bit differently. So I realize that those are part of it, and I think I could say those as we go through each candidate without any problem of why I think someone's a little better on this than that. And so I'm fine going through one by one and using 3 to 4 of these things that I think are most important to me.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez?
I I like a lot of what we're discussing up here, and I like the point about bringing it outside of a individual level. I know at some point we're going to have to get there again, but I really liked what Councilmember Olson said about what the other criteria she was thinking about as she evaluated. Like, one that stood out to me was the breadth of community service over time. For me, that's one I had in the back of my head too after all of this, that, you know, well, which of the candidates have been already contributing to the community? That means a lot to me, and I think that says a lot about the person. So that, and I think also it's important, which we didn't really touch on too much in the questions, but respectful communication. I think that's always going to be really important, and listening and being open to other opinions. I think that is also really important for me as I'm evaluating each of the candidates, because that's a key part of what we do here. And so I think for me, it's just another layer on top of this matrix by which I'm kind of viewing the candidates and thinking about it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember, okay.
I forgot something.
Okay, Councilmember
I
Olson.
also wanted to say, and I hope this doesn't really throw us off track, but I have never hired anybody where I didn't have a second interview. So I have to be very honest that this is really, my stomach is just like churning about taking something from a 45-minute interview with someone and deciding the fate of District 1 and our council. And so that really does weigh heavy on me. I would never do this in interviewing people for a job that I have to oversee. So I don't know how we mitigate that, other than, you know, some people we know more than others because we may have been around them or heard them here before or whatever, and that can be both positive and negative for them. And I just want to be really honest about that. That's also playing into this.
Right. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have lots of faults, and thankfully I'm happy to definitely name one of them as being maybe not as clear as I always want to be when I'm speaking. I'm really much better in writing. So I think I wasn't clear earlier, because I do concur with what Council Members Martinez and Olson just said. I think my distinction was that I wanted to make sure all 6 of us were okay on discussing the 3, and maybe it's just a small difference that can be resolved by discussing as you want to proceed. But all I wanted was that we agree, and maybe it's too much pomp and circumstance, agree on maybe extrapolating a few metrics to discuss and to evaluate these final 4 on. We say yes, yay, let's go with that. Okay, we select the 3, then we move forward and then talk about each candidate in terms of those 3. That's all. I mean, obviously it needs to get to the candidate by candidate measure, but I want to first start with the thing by which we're measuring the candidate, rather than candidate 1, blah, 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 candidate 2, what do we think of these metrics, candidate 3, right? It's the vertical versus the horizontal in the data file. So I want it to be bound on the criteria measurement, not the candidate. And so that's all I was saying, but it by no means meant I didn't want to discuss the candidates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I just wanted to make clear, I mean, I've sat out in that audience plenty of times, plenty of years, and I wanted to make clear, I did lean over and say something to Councilmember Cuesta, and I need to disclose that because this is a public meeting, and anything that is set up here should be part of the public record. I believe he picked up his phone to text or look at something for business or personal. And nonetheless, I just simply leaned over and reminded him that anything that he does on this dais is open records requestable because he is a new member. There was nothing else said about the candidate or anything else, but I know when I was sitting out in the audience and somebody would lean over and start chitty-chatting with somebody, that I would give the impression that they were probably talking about me in the audience. Probably, Carl, you thought that, and I don't want you to think that. So I just wanted to make sure that I disclose that. That is all that I said to the council member, was to just be a reminder that everything we do up here, both on our computers and our phones, is open records requestable, and just to be open with everybody. Thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Councilmember Barentine was very wise in pointing out to me that optics matter, and I appreciate the reminder. Thank you. But yes, I did pick up my phone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is kind of difficult in how to proceed. The one thing that I think is beneficial by discussing qualities that we appreciate and take it out of, because I don't necessarily want to go into the reasons that we don't want one person over another person, because then what happens, whoever is chosen, we all want to work with them. And I think that creates could create problems. I do appreciate Councilmember Olson's openness that sometimes when people have come to speak and we do have either positive or negative feelings, that becomes problematic. And I'll be real honest with you, that is the reason I never wanted to apply for a board and commission. I didn't come to council to speak that often, but I thought once you've applied, people know a lot more about you. And it's not that I'm trying to hide that, but I was trying to avoid that situation of people giving me, or me giving people reasons why they wouldn't choose me to be on council. I mean, and I appreciate that honesty, because we are all subject to that. Councilmember Barentine?
It's been pretty clear. I mean, there have been people that have come before council, and that has played a role in either them, most of the time, not being appointed or having concerns about appointing them to a board or commission. And I understand that there's people that won't apply because they think too many people on council would hold a personal grudge or not, and that's generally not true, but I don't blame them for the impressions that they get. That's fine. I don't think that the research ability, the time, the commitment or love for the community, the independence, which were some of the things that Councilmember Olson brought up, or the time service to the community or involvement or ability to get along. I don't think there's any one of the 7 that don't possess those qualities. So we can, I think that we've already measured the height. We just need to start deciding what height we think is perfect in order to go ahead and make this decision. So that is subjective. And quite honestly, I don't think any of the 7 don't have the qualities. We bring up all the qualities of character and integrity and honesty and forthrightness and apple pie in the American way, and I believe all 7 of them have that. And then we made a decision based on that. To the degree that they have it or how we feel that they're going to utilize that is a subjective thing, and we came up with the 2 people that we had. So I would like to go to Councilmember Questa's option of finding out how the people that we thought showed that best for us. So, I mean, I don't think none of the candidates lacked any of those qualities. So they're all great qualities, and we need to start talking about, I would go with I would defer to what he had recommended earlier to start.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wink.
So since we've looked at the height of their accomplishments and we can't find agreement among the 6 of us, maybe we look at the height and the breadth of these accomplishments and the representation of each council or council member applicant in the areas of evaluation. Maybe it's not just height, but what else? Where else can we evaluate them? Maybe it's breadth. Maybe in terms of, maybe they've been working with the community. Okay, a lot. Height, 6. We give them a 5 or whatever. But to what degree have they been involved in the community? Maybe when we start looking at the breadth of it, we start seeing different levels of numbers. I'm only saying this because we looked at height before and we were split. So looking at height again, like how does that get us to an easier decision tonight without us being here till 6 in the morning?
I can assure you we will not be here till 6 in the morning.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem Russell. I can't tell you enough. I appreciate that statement. However, if we looked at A before and A did not get us to the solution, then ladies and gentlemen, let us find a different combination of criteria to find a solution. It cannot be the same thing we looked at before. How are we going to look at the same candidates with some of the same rubric? I mean, we're obviously looking at the same areas of criteria to decide on who should be a council member for the next year and a half, year and 4 months. So is it what we looked at before? Is it a modification of that? Is it that plus something else is all I'm saying. It cannot be the same thing.
Thank you, Councilmember Wink. Do I have any more thoughts on what Councilmember Cuesta suggested about moving forward with talking about the qualities and characteristics of our top 2 candidates? I am okay with moving forward with that. I think that is probably a good idea, but and I think that if we were going to do that, I would start at that end of the dais. But if there isn't more, Councilmember Martinez.
I was going to say I'm fine with that approach, but like Councilmember Wink mentioned, I think we kind of started down that path and we got to this kind of place where we're stuck. And so I think at some point we're going to have to either weigh in some other criteria or think about it differently to move our discussion forward. But I think we can certainly try it again as it is.
Okay, and I felt like things were more general, even though by the time we came with our top 2, we had been in the study session just talking about the general characteristics of all 7 candidates, and then we came in here and we all listed our top 2, and then it was 10 o'clock and it was an even tie on the top 2 that we have. I think if we start moving forward with this and see if this is going to work, then we may have to decide that we're going to do something different. Thank you. Did you press it again?
I just had one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I think you mentioned earlier, or somebody did, about I would like to try to keep it positive, only talk about their strengths and not say why we think another person is bad for this. So if we could try to keep it just to the pros and the positives, I think that's good.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Councilmember Martinez. Councilmember Cuesta?
Pardon me. Thank you. And that's where I thought we left it off at our final meeting was we got to 10 o'clock, everybody throwing out their 2 names. I didn't think we were at a dead stalemate yet. Now, we may get down our candidates who everybody likes. Hopefully there's some powers of persuasion amongst each other, and maybe we can break the 3-3. If not, then, of course, we explore other options. And I never doubt the vote of the electorate and the mind of the electorate. But I didn't even think we've each had the opportunity to say why we like this candidate, why we think this candidate is the right fit. And maybe there is the opportunity to sway a fellow member here. We can dig back into the qualities. I, at this point, think that's a step back. I really think I was hoping to see maybe this also reveals how dug in is everybody on a particular candidate. And if we are locked in, then, again, we explore their options. But I don't think we've reached that point yet where we're saying that this is immovable.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wink?
So, Councilmember Cuesta, I like this. So, how do you want us to indicate how dug in we are? I think that might be a really nice place to start, and I love it actually. So, how do we express that in your view?
Well, it's too early to say because you haven't heard the other candidates' opinions on where.
We already said last week.
I'm sorry.
We said on that Monday. You want us to restate? I'm sorry. I'm doing
Actually, okay, no, that's not okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Councilmember Cuesta, and he will demonstrate what he is thinking and how we're going to get started.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you. So when we got to last week, going back to that point, again, we had to dance around in the study session of who do we like and why do we like them. We can't really give specifics. And this was our opportunity in here to say, this is who I like, this is why I like them, this is my candidate. And we left, here's our top two, and then we adjourned. And I don't think we really got to dig down and say, this is why I think this person's number 1 over number 3 or number 5. And I think that that's critical. Please, point of information? Yes, and I can dig into that now. If there's a point of information, I'm happy to take
Yes,
it.
point of information. So it seemed that you were previously saying, not necessarily to, maybe I'm just not thinking clearly tonight, not to go through what it was about each candidate, but how invested we were in each one. But now it seems you want us to go through a process. So is there a process of, again, reviewing why we voted on the ones we voted for before, and then maybe after all 6 of us have gone through that process, then we go through a point of investment or level of investment vote?
And here's what I was going to do. I was going to go over there's one candidate that just stands out for me, and I can tell you why I think this is the person for this table. And I'd like to hear the same from you guys. Why do you think these are the person that made your top 1, top 2, that's the person for this table? You may have seen qualities that I didn't see as well. Earlier at the council, we just said, well, vaguely I like this person, that person. I think we're down to this is who I want sitting at the table with us. Now, I will echo the sentiment of several people up here. I think everybody up here can get along with every one of those candidates. I don't think there's a single person that's going to disrupt the energy we have here or the working environment we have here. So I'm going to be happy with any one of these candidates, to be sure. Having said that, there is one that stands out for me. I'm happy to tell everybody why that's the case. And I will say that, there's a particular candidate that I like. I may hear varying information otherwise that persuades me. I'm thinking I can't be the only one up here who has a candidate they like. And we're down to voting. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this is the candidate I like. Voting is very art and science, as you alluded to, and I appreciate that analogy. But yeah, I'm down to a candidate I like. I'm happy to share why I am. I'd like to hear why other folks have got their top 1, top 2, whatever the case may be. We can reconvene, see if there's been any movement here, and then if there hasn't, and we can pursue other options. Now, I know that we're trying to quantify every single thing we do up here, so I'm not sure about putting a number of how dug in I am, but that is where I'm at. I'm happy to give my perspective on why I think that there is a leading candidate that I think would be not even the best fit for this council, but the best fit for Inglewood, not only for the next 2 years, but what I foresee is possibly the next 6 years. And then I'd like to hear other people's perspective as well on why I think they've settled on a person.
Councilmember Cuesta, I really would like for you to go ahead and do that and delay discussion because I think we're just going around in circles.
Well spoken. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So digging in, and I stated this last week, my number 1 candidate was Andrea Mannion. And there were several reasons for that. We can get into the qualities that reflect on those reasons. And I'm going to go down the list that I made for Ms. Mannion. When I was still running, I'm going on a lot of substance too. I think the councilmember also made a good point. We had a 45-minute interview, and not even that long in some cases. And some of it was closer to a 30-minute interview with some of these folks. So I can take those answers at their word, which I do in each one, but it only demonstrates so much to me. And so I am going off of a lot of action that I've seen, demonstrated substance that I have seen from candidates. Andrea has been hands down the most active person I've seen at City Council. When I was still running, I can remember that City Council at the time was going through the 2018 budget. She came up to the dais. She had the budget printed out. She went over several line-by-line items that she felt were either incorrect, that she took objection to, and I thought that showed a real dedication for a private citizen to put in that kind of time and effort, just as, again, a general citizen of District 1. I will also remind everybody that a couple weeks ago, we had an executive session go till 1 a.m., and I'm sure many of us didn't even want to be here that late. When we came out, there were 3 people standing from the general citizenry. One was one of my bosses out there, Mr. Scott Gilbert. The other 2 were Andrea Mannion and her husband, Dan Mannion. And that said an awful lot to me. Somebody that was willing to stay to the bitter end till 1 a.m., most of it just waiting us out, not even gathering information. So it really showed a level of dedication to council that I really can't pull out of an interview that some of the other folks have. It's no secret that I am very budget focused. And needless to say, I think that is her acumen, not only in profession, but also in education. She has her bachelor's in accounting, master's in taxation. I believe she was cum laude in the bachelor's degree. And then she's an accountant by trade. In addition to that, she has overseen ACE, and my understanding has really turned the program around. But her involvement with ACE shows not only her personal connection as she runs a business in Inglewood, but also a connection to Inglewood businesses, which I think is extremely valuable. I think she really has a passion for crunching numbers. Going back to the budget, I don't think it's just what she does as a profession. I get the impression she truly enjoys doing it. And I think that, again, with budget being such an issue, now, again, we got very good news at our last study session that things are going well. I think, again, best for Inglewood, I would love to have somebody like that crunching numbers for the next at least 2 years, if not 6 years. In her interview, she indicated she would definitely run for another 4. I think that would be a tremendous asset to City Council. I'd love to have it up here. I mean, that's, again, from my perspective, my vote, a second to none quality. I did like her personal story where she went to a zero-based budgeting, and she now has 0 debt. And at first when she was telling that story, I was thinking, because she's a young woman, I don't know how old, but a younger woman, I was thinking she meant student loan, car payment, and then later she wanted to say she has paid off her mortgage. I would imagine she's under 40. I'll have mine till I'm about 80, I assume. So I was extremely impressed that she had such great control of personal finances, which I think reflects well, and I think is a talent that she will bring to the city's finances as well. The other candidates, again, were all very, very great. I can work with any one of those candidates. I would be happy to work with any one of those candidates. Again, I don't think any one of them will be anything but an asset to the council. But I think that the best for the city for the next 2 years, if not 6, would be Andrea Mannion. And that is my candidate. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Can I ask, do we want to take comments, or do we just want to? Okay. Councilmember Wink, go ahead because you had pushed your button.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. You're mayor already.
No.
Thank you, Member Costa. I beg your pardon. Applicant Mannion does have a tremendous passion for crunching numbers. It's her vocation. It's her job. However, one of the thoughts I have, she's very strong, and I know her well in the community. One of the thoughts I have, and I'd like you all to just think about what this means for you, is that we already have the #1 accountant in Englewood already in residence on our council. And so why, when we have such an expert in accounting on our council, do we need another one? We have one of the best accountants in Englewood sitting on our council and one of the hardest working members of our council here on council already. So why do we need another member?
Point of order. Point of order. This is what I do not want it to turn into. When
Complimenting me?
Yeah, definitely, because it is that. Having one person share why they feel very strongly about something, and then that put into question. That is why I believe that we were dancing around in the study session 2 weeks ago. And so I really don't want to do that.
Can you say a little more?
About dancing around?
So I was responding to Councilmember Cuesta's points, which I jotted down. So I was responding to them, but we don't want to respond to those points that he made.
I don't think it's a good idea to respond to the points at this point. I think the purpose of doing this is coming up with the strongest candidate, the strongest potential. You may disagree with that, but just, okay, just a minute. Councilmember Martinez.
I was going to say, should we just go down the line and then for each of us and then discuss? Is that what you'd prefer?
Well, I want to talk about this. Okay. Councilmember Barentine?
I do not believe that I am deserving of the kind of praise or adulation that she was providing for me, nor do I consider myself the best accountant in Inglewood or anything of the nature of that. So if, aside from those kind of comments, which I take very complimentary, thank you very much, I would really like to hear the points that Councilmember Wink wanted to say, if she would graciously leave me out of it.
Okay. All right.
Educationally do not even come close to the reach that she has in her profession. So if she'll leave me out of it as a replacement for any candidate, then because I can't serve two, then I would love to hear the rest of the comments to the points that Councilmember Cuesta made.
Okay, so then, and then can we evaluate whether this is what we need to do when we all share? So, all right, Councilmember Wink.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Barentine. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So personal finance, I think, is extremely admirable, and the achievement is admirable. I just want us to be cognizant of the vast difference between personal finance and a municipal government finance, and the management and direction of municipal government finance and all of the line items and the workings and the machinations. It's apples and oysters. It's not oranges and apples. I think they're different fruit or different entities. So I have all the positive feelings about this candidate. Just facts be stated. These things are different. So can we look at that? Maybe. And then I'm going to hold my tongue for now on that, but the personal finance thing, I just wanted to raise that. Thank you. Good point.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Quest, did you have more that you wanted to address?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
I guess my question would be, we each had two, so I wondered if we should each talk about our two. Are you just going to wait until the next round, or?
I may go in the next round at this point. Again, I've said enough at this time. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Thank you. Now, one question that I have, because do we want to discuss the things that Councilmember Wink brought up, because or do we just wait to address those?
I'd like to go ahead and go next.
Okay, great. Councilmember Barentine.
In keeping with the same philosophy, I had two top candidates, and that was Andrea Mannion and Carson Green. I think that they both, like the other seven candidates, all seven candidates exemplify great character and integrity. I won't beat all of the reasons. I agree with Councilmember Quest and his very researched and methodical way of presentation. I have a huge amount of respect for, and so I won't even try and top that. It boiled down to basically the budget piece of it in the charter. That's our job. We have three responsibilities: hire and fire the city manager, hire and fire, not hire and fire. I meant hire and, if possible, hire a city manager and hire a city attorney, and those are our two direct hires. And then we don't have direct control over any of the departments, but we do have control over whether they have any money or not. And that's how we have control in the city in the representation that we do for our bosses, which are our constituents. And so the budget is the foremost. Handling the finances is both the power and authority that we have in order to go ahead and represent. So the budget is the largest piece. I will just go ahead and bring in a couple of the comments that Councilmember Wink brought up, and that is I have analyzed and reviewed more CAFRs than you can shake a stick at, both for our own community and other communities, but I have never put one together, and Andrea Mannion has. That's exactly the document that we go ahead and review here on a municipal level. So I think that it's very easy to go ahead a little bit to the opposite of what you said. It's very easy for us to go ahead and spend millions of dollars because it's somebody else's money. I think when you, on a personal level, can show the self-discipline to put that into your own personal life, I think that's remarkable. So not only do I think she has both the government aspect of this, I think that she demonstrates that with the self-discipline in her own personal life. So, and her very active in the community, and showed a huge amount of leadership in taking the ACE committee and bringing it into something that was very viable for the community and very useful for this council to move that forward. And I was very happy to see that kind of involvement and dedication was something that was a difficult thing to do, and ended up with everybody happy with her, including the staff and businesses, and we got a board that was moving forward more and being more productive. So I would respectfully just disagree with Councilmember Wink in that I don't think it was just a personal versus government finance. She had done accounting for the county level and put together CAFRs, and I think that that's a huge learning curve for anybody to try to navigate that on council, and I think that that would give her an extreme heads up. If we go for a second round, I would be more than happy to go into the qualities of why I'm so very impressed with Mr. Carson Green and why I think he would also serve very well. But Andrea Mannion was my first choice for the reasons that I've just stated.
Thank you, Councilmember Barentine. Councilmember Wink.
Sorry?
Do you want to go ahead and share the reasons that you are supporting
The two candidates?
Pardon me? You had two candidates that you supported at the beginning, and so do you just want to share?
Sure.
It's your turn to share.
On last week, Monday, I shared that I was in support of applicant Scott Danford and applicant Othaniel Sierra. Mr. Danford has been in Englewood for one of the longest stretches of time. I appreciate the time commitment, but that is by no means the sole consideration, obviously. So I was suggesting earlier, not just the depth, but the breadth of engagement and commitment, demonstration of involvement and commitment, really, to the community. And over those years, although he has not been a member of a board or commission, that isn't all that's available. He has been a member of the Chamber of Commerce and active member as business owner and homeowner. And further to that, the group whose name is escaping me just at this moment, but in terms of, it was a youth, thank you, the Pirate Youth Sports League. I know that he has been an a staunch advocate of taking that from a place before to a positive position and working with parents in the community and other community leaders to bring this important facet of our community into a place of positivity and to face some challenges that existed. And so it took a lot of hard work. I've heard a lot of people were talking about it to me this Saturday, and I was astounded at how many people knew about it and how many people came up without my even asking them and just said it to me. And I thought, oh my goodness, okay, thank you for telling me. That's all I said. Thank you for telling me. But it indicates extreme involvement in the community and extreme dedication to making our community better for not just one constituent level, but his overall contribution as a non-member of a board and commission and a non-member of a board and commission. He's still been active. He's still been very, very vigilant and committed to making Englewood better. He's very outgoing. Our roles here are to represent citizens, and I think it helps when citizens feel they can communicate with us, and when citizens do reach out and when we reach back out, and we can have that open line of dialogue and in terms of sharing concerns and knowing that you do have a voice in your municipal government. Scott seemed to give me that very strong feeling that he was every bit that individual. He already was and could be that much more as a District 1 representative. It seemed that he had that level of freedom in his life in terms of timing and orchestration of events, because this takes a lot of time. And I don't want to overlook that. As someone new here, it's not nothing. It takes a tremendous amount of time if you're going to do it properly. And Scott seemed to have the wherewithal and the understanding and the ability to not just fit it in, but make it work well with his whole life. And so I appreciated that. I mean, he's very intelligent, outgoing. So I give him those characteristics. And I will say that Mr. Sierra Othaniel is a younger member of our community. He's been here for fewer years than Mr. Danford, but I think approximately 8 years. I'm not going to take the minutes to look up my notes here. But he's been here a significant enough amount of time. He owns a home. He has a child at Charles Hayes School. I appreciated the experience that he had and the involvement on that level. Sure, he's not running for school board. The involvement in the community by way of connecting with other parents in your district and understanding what the needs and concerns are for other individuals who have children in your district. It doesn't have to be child-centric, these concerns. He seemed to be very on top of it and very aware of it. He seemed to be someone who is well aware of District 1. He seemed to me maybe the top candidate for having an awareness of District 1, of where District 1 was, of where the parameters are of our geography extended, and what each small geographic pocket indicated in terms of the population and the ratio of residents to business, to commercial, to industrial. He seemed to have that understanding, because he said that, and it was very honest. He said that he rode his bike and he went running around the city, and so he knew it just because he exercised a ton, and he went running up there and went, south, and then went over here and there, and so he knew of that area, and he knew what was there, what was growing, what had changed over time. Very involved in his sports, and he tried to show us a lot of analogies to his abilities to contribute to council through his sports, which lead to healthful decision making, of course. But he seemed to me to really understand what District 1 was, what District 1 needed, what District 1 wanted in terms of what he'd seen and what he'd understood, but who he knew in District 1 and who he'd already communicated with in District 1 in terms of what they thought of District 1. He is involved in the Citizens Alliance for Sustainable Englewood, the CASE group. And I've gone to some of those meetings. I'm not a member of that group. I've gone to some of those meetings. I think all facets of our issues are important. Absolutely. To what we do well here. So what I can learn and contribute in terms of all of it means I'm doing a decent job. And so I know that he attends most, if not all of those meetings. And that, in terms of formal engagement in the community through a formally organized group, I know that it's CASE. It's not a board or commission. It's CASE. I don't know if we want to talk to a CASE member, but he's always been respectful. I think he had the strongest understanding of what it took to sit on council, what the challenges for council members were, what the role of council members were in the community, just the overall sort of a multi-dimensional view of council as opposed to I am an engaged citizen. I got the sense he could hit the ground running, as so to say, immediately. And he also struck me as somebody who was incredibly independent of thought in that he could understand the dynamics of a group of individuals and listen and think and be thoughtful, but by no means would he not make a decision without thinking carefully for himself about what he knew and the history he knew and the understandings he had on an issue. And I kind of respected that, just strength of independent thought. I think we need that variation. I think he was young and eager and energetic and extremely passionate about the role. And all of his skills, his technical skills I haven't spoken of here, but those were even stronger. I mean, those with what I just mentioned, so that he could be an excellent choice for the District 1 candidate.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Olson?
Right.
Point of order first.
Okay.
I want to know when we have scheduled a break, and I just thought.
Okay. I think perhaps before we go
Good
any
time to take a
farther,
break.
it is a good time to take a
I
break.
just thought since it was halfway through,
Right.
I didn't mean to
Okay.
interrupt Councilmember
Thank you.
Olson. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me.
Right.
Okay. Recess for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. I now know to call for him.
Right there. I'm like, oh, that's going to hurt if I snag on something.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
If council will take their seats, we'll get started again. Call this meeting back to order. Councilmember Olson.
Thank you. I am going to preface, I'm going to talk about both of my top two candidates because they both reached the top level for different reasons. And one of the things that I did when I was looking at all of this, all the candidates, was I'm not looking for any one particular thing. I'm looking for multiple pieces that they can bring. So if someone has a specific expertise skill very deep in one area, that's not going to score high for me. It's true for a person, but it's not going to score high for me. Partly because I believe very, very strongly that we hire professional staff here. We have a lot of breadth and depth in our council already with a number of things under what our requirements are, and so I trust that. So here's I'll go with Scott Danford first, since I'm keeping in my alpha order. My reasons for seeing Scott and Othoniel at the top. For Scott, I thought that he was very self-motivated, was a risk taker, had a certain set of values and choices that showed a real marked positive attitude. And I think that is really, really important to move the city forward in the kinds of things that we need to do to capitalize upon the kind of the market we're in the world right now, the kind of tensions we have about land use, to think those through and be positive in trying to do that. I think there's a customer service mentality with him that's strong in his background, and that's a lot of what district work is, and it is for at large too. But all of us need to be listening, asking, advocating, and I think that's been his role in his service. I think he has a strong voice and rational and reasonable kind of decision-making process. I don't know him outside of Chamber of Commerce at all, so I'm not a friend of his or anything like that in other setting, but I've watched him on the Chamber of Commerce. He always asks really good questions when he is there. He's been there for almost all meetings that I've been there for. He brings a certain energy to the group that's very, very helpful, very pointed questions that help you think further. Great when critiquing things after the fact and trying to think, okay, what else could we do to improve that in the future? His talking about homelessness that night when he had watched it that morning, it just seemed that was probably one of the more authentic things that I heard him talking about. It really seemed to bother him, and I liked hearing that. I mean, I felt bad about the situation. It was the first time I'd heard that the homeless had been cleared out. I understand why we were doing that, but he truly connected to that and was worried about it and was trying to already think about what could we do differently with this. Let's see. I think he has the time at this point in his life. I think it looks like he's got things in a balance with his own business. Being able to own his own business in the area, I think, was positive. His greatest strengths: optimism, ability to connect and be cohesive, help bring cohesion. He's had strong experiences on teams. That's his business role, and a couple of others were like that. They're not lone rangers. They don't work on their own, which is not a negative thing. It's just that we need someone who can work on teams. He did understand some of the issues of his neighborhood. He's got some strong alliances, I think, within his areas that he's lived in. And then when I was looking at these other, issues, or not issues, but topic areas that we talked about, or I talked about as being kind of an overlay, I thought his approach to conflict in groups was very good, non-blaming, open to thinking a different way and finding another process of deciding and agreeing or finding common ground. Let's see, breadth of interest. I think others have talked about his involvement in the chamber, also the pirate sports, youth sports, his own business, and a number of the events that he's done around the city. Let's see if there's anything else that might be helpful. I thought he took his application very seriously and filled it out quite well and giving some great background. And those things rose to the top for me. I do like the breadth and depth of his candidacy. That's what I think I was looking for, and the energy and optimism that I thought he would bring. For Mr. Sierra, let's see. I did like that I found him to be one of the most humble of all the candidates. There's a strong humility with him, and I think that's important in this. We can get kind of, some people can get kind of strong-headed, and there seemed to be a learning atmosphere with him that I really appreciated. He listens. He doesn't have to be the expert. He was really clear about that. Optimistic, looks for win-wins, and I think he gave some great examples for that. He builds relationships, and he works on vision, sees his ability to focus on goals, and gave some really great examples of that from his workplace. And also his personal life on, setting goals in the marathon. And so it's sort of a complementary example of personal life that we got from another candidate. I thought some of his understanding of what the assets and things he'd like to see change within Inglewood were broad, too. They weren't just on one issue. He was thinking about a number of different things. And then his conflict resolution style and his probably was the most poignant, was he had this adversarial situation with customer that rather than just tell the customer how it was or, okay, I'm going to lose this one, he really showed the ability to think differently, open himself up to a new idea, and try and think through differently, even to the point where it changed things for the way that they did things. So it wasn't just resolving that, but actually opening himself up for new possibilities within his organization. And I think that's admirable. It's not a skill that's really easily developed if you don't work with a lot of groups. He does see his role as one of listening, connecting, following up, setting priorities. He was very clear about that. It was great to hear. I do think he has strong revenue understanding, how to make things happen financially in budgets. So I think he would have, the learning curve there would not be high. It'd be good. I think he'd have a strong sense of it. Then in terms of some of the other overlays, again, I also felt like he was, out of all the candidates, higher level of independence from any one person on this council or any one group in the city. He's involved with CASE. I guess he talked about it a little bit. That's a very young group. It's not like he's been entrenched in something. So I actually liked that independence. And I don't know him a whole lot outside of this. I've just seen him recently. But I loved that about him. I don't know where he's going to come on some things. He was pretty upfront with us about some things, where others were not. Probably didn't tell us about what they thought about ADUs and. But I thought, last thing, I think Councilmember Wink said this, the District 1 description I thought was the most comprehensive. He knew different parts of the geography that no one else had mentioned, and it's probably because he has a visceral relationship with the district, because he runs through it, he bikes through it, he's looking for safety, he's looking for things to do with his child, and he's engaged in that. And whenever any of us up here that have been parents, you know that once you have kids, it roots you in the community in a different way than when you don't. I feel less rooted now than I did before, now that my kids are grown and gone out of the house. And I like that, too, about what he brings. He's got a sense of what's going on in neighborhoods and parents and what their needs are. So those are my two.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Olson. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. My top two candidates were also Scott Danford and Othoniel Sierra. I'll start with the qualities I really appreciated about Scott Danford. He had an extremely positive energy. He just exuded it, and I think that would be a nice addition to council. It seemed to come across in everything he said, every question he answered, and I really appreciate that. What I think I appreciate the most about him as a candidate is his wide spectrum of service to the community. It's been mentioned before, but he is on the board for the Chamber of Commerce and the Pirate Youth Sports, and I really respect that those are not single-focused groups. There are business community and our youth sports community, and I think it says a lot about him that he's willing to put in the time and effort and energy to improve both of these really important areas of our community. So that, to me, stood out the most with him. I respect that a lot, and it shows that he's willing to do the work and put in the time and energy it takes to improve groups and make improvements for those different parts of our city. He was very optimistic. He likes to learn, which I think is really important as a council member. I really liked his ideas and thoughts on improving social services through partnerships. I think Councilmember Olson mentioned kind of the statements he made about the homeless issue that took place the day of his interview. And it did seem very authentic and genuine, his responses to that and how much he cared. And to me, that goes a long way. I also really liked his response to the conflict question. He gave an example of when, I think it was in some sort of professional setting, but there was layoffs or somebody wasn't doing well or something, and they asked questions of like the lower performers and the higher performers, and they listened and took in that feedback and implemented a new process because of it. And I think that is really important in working through conflict and working in making anything better, is listening and thinking about things in ways that you could do things differently. It's not always easy to think, oh, I could do something different. So I think it's important, and it's a nice quality that he has, and he gave us a real life example of that. He clearly understands the role of being a council member. He was very articulate in explaining, what he thought the time commitments and things were. Very outgoing. He also has, from what I mentioned before, a great experience working within groups that may have conflicting viewpoints or that need to work together to come to any kind of decisions. His work on both the Chamber of Commerce and the Pirate Youth Sports, I'm sure that's a regular example of a great group experience for him. He also put a lot of thought into his written application. I think he really took that seriously, and I really appreciate how concise and thorough he was in his written application. Okay, and then Othoniel Sierra, there's a lot I liked about him as well. I really liked that he referenced specific items in the comp plan. It shows that he has done a little bit of research into what we have outlined in our comprehensive plan, and I really like that research aspect. He also mentioned the importance of our water rights, which we all know is extremely important to our community. He also gave several examples of being willing to listen and ask questions, and I think that's really important for a council person to be able to do. And I think like Councilmember Olson mentioned, that he gave a good example of a professional experience where his client was unhappy. They looked back, they asked questions, looked back at their own process, and then improved their process because of it. So I think it really shows that he's willing to learn through kind of maybe discomfort and conflict to make things better. So I really respect that a lot. He also mentioned various breadth of specific things that we've talked about. So I like that he wasn't just focused on one issue or topic. He mentioned the biogas project, pros and cons of impact fees, food, historical buildings, a variety of topics. So I really appreciate that. He mentioned a lot of those different things and not just single area focus. He also mentioned that he grew up in a Spanish-speaking home, and I think that's a perspective that would really benefit council. I did also like that he sets individual goals. We've set goals here on council. We're going to be doing that again, and I think that's also very important. And I really like the topic, or the how much time he spent talking about. He's not an expert on everything, but he knows who to reach out to when it's time to call in the experts. You know, none of us on here on council are experts at everything. There's no possible way. So he's smart enough to know that there are experts on things, and when it's appropriate to bring them in and get guidance from them and information. So I really appreciated that. And he seemed extremely authentic and genuine in all of his responses. He was quite humble, and I really like that quality as well. And I like that he mentioned several times he looks for win-win situations. I think that's always kind of what we're trying to do, so I think the fact that he mentioned it several times was nice. I also like the work that he has done as part of the citizen group with CASE. What they do is extremely important, and I really appreciate the work they do on the environmental issues and the topics they discuss, and they are really active and do a lot of work, and I really respect what they do and that they're willing to put in the time and work on it, and like that he's takes that initiative as well. And I also like that he did mention so many specific things about District 1. So, sorry if that was long.
No, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. And my top two picks were Andrea Mannion and Carson Green, and I agree, any one of the of our applicants I could work with. I mean, they all had positive characteristics, and I greatly appreciate all of that. So I am going to, I like the thing that I liked both about Andrea Mannion and Carson Green was their involvement in city government, in the boards and commissions. And the fact that Andrea has been coming to city council meetings for a couple of years, and I think when she's not here that she does watch council meetings online. And the thing that I liked most about her is she does have background in government. I rated her stump speech the highest of any of the other candidates. Even though she was sick, she had an understanding. She grew up. Her mother was the city clerk in Thornton, I believe, and so she has an understanding of how city governments work. But she also worked as an accountant for the State Department of Revenue, I believe, for 8 years. And government accounting is totally different than personal finances but I believe because of her work experience, she does have an understanding of government accounting. And that has been my greatest concern since I've been on council. The other thing that I think is really good, I attended council meetings every single meeting that I could come to for 2 years. I don't care how many times you have come, you are not totally prepared to sit on city council until you have been sitting here. And I think that because of Carson Green and Andrea Mannion's involvement in, Carson with the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, they have a better advantage in, I believe, understanding how things really work. I do believe that Andrea is very dedicated and disciplined. You cannot get to being debt-free in 3 years if you are not dedicated and disciplined. And when she was asked the question, what do you think about governments being debt-free, her response was, I don't want to put a burden on the backs of the taxpayers. And so I just think she has a level of understanding of the budget and the budget process that would help this council in that area. I do not believe she is a one-issue person. I was very impressed with the fact that when she got on ACE, she had been to 2 meetings in the first 9 months, and they made her chair, and she turned that board around because she was able to work with staff and also with the board. And she learns conflict mostly through misunderstanding and miscommunication, or she believes that conflict is mostly about misunderstanding and miscommunication, and the best way to deal with that is to lead by example. I do believe that Andrea Mannion is a leader by example. She does take time she's taken time over the last several years to go to Joe's meetings. When you're involved at that level, you understand what's going on in the city. I like the fact that she has 3 strengths: time managing, the 3 strengths that she listed: time management and ability to prioritize. She is not afraid to ask questions or ask for help. I believe that demonstrates a level of humility. She doesn't know all of the answers, and she is very detail-oriented. Let's see. And I really loved the question when she's changed her mind, and she said she was totally passionate about ADUs, and then after attending meetings and doing all the research, she did change her mind. And so the truth is, I believe that there is a level of flexibility as she learns, whether it is meeting with constituents or hearing information from staff. I do believe that she is open to change. And the other things that have already been shared by Councilmember Barentine and Councilmember Cuesta, I do believe that Andrea Mannion is probably the most prepared and the most qualified. I believe that it will take her less time to get up to speed than some of the other candidates who have not been as engaged with city government. And so those are the reasons that I am supporting Andrea Mannion. And Carson Green also has a lot of great characteristics as well. For right now, I'm going to stop there. Councilmember Barentine.
I think kind of back to the culture piece of it, it kind of ends up dividing a little bit in kind of the philosophy of what we think the best council person would be. Some of us believe that, we should defer to staff and that the staff is more experts and we should defer more like that. Some of us think that, we look at our representation differently on trying to represent our community, the budget versus social and environmental issues, what the government role is. We are somewhat divided in what we believe our role is on here, and that comes out in the way that we debate things, the issues we bring up, the kind of concerns that we have on how we move forward. And I think that's kind of come out in the choices that we made, and those beliefs of how I represent my constituents, what I believe my responsibility is pretty ingrained in me. I mean, that is the foundation. It is the rock that I come from and that I build on as I move forward and I make decisions and I represent and present at council. And my district is behind me on that. I have very little pushback from those things. I have a lot of conversations and coffees and stuff. But that's my district, and my district is different than other areas here. None of us are representing District 1, and the person who did for the last 10 years is not truly represented in any of the 7 that came forward. I mean, he was quite different than maybe the qualities that each of us are looking for, because he had his own unique qualities, and that district saw fit to continue to have him serve for 10 years. So while I may believe that Andrea Mannion best exemplifies those kind of virtues and concerns that District 1 had in Joe Jefferson, and maybe I agree with all of them or don't agree with all of them, but that's who they chose. And so I think that we are at that's what's coming out. What is coming out here is not anything necessarily as much about these candidates, but the things that each of us hold near and dear and what got us elected. I mean, we went and talked to people and they wanted that kind of representation, and so of course we all hold that near and dear to us. So I'm not I'm not sure that we're I'm not going to be able to change the rock on which I have built what I believe is my representation and what I hold so near and dear to me. And I'm hearing some very fundamental differences on how we're each the aspects that we're trying to bring back to council. So I don't quite know where we go from here.
I actually agree with you. And so I'm not exactly sure where to go from here. Do we have any suggestions? Councilmember Olson.
I heard from two of our council members that you believe any of these candidates would work, and so I'm wondering if you're willing to accept one of the two. One of the candidates that we discussed tonight was not in my top 4, so it's not one is not even on for me. So I'm wondering if that's true or not. Would you be happy with any of these candidates?
That I believe what I said and what I thought I heard some other people say, including you guys, is that I think we could, if District 1 were to go ahead and have an election, I think I would be able to work with anybody they elected from their district. Anybody. I would be able to work with anybody who's elected, because I believe that then that's the choice that they're making. If it is up to us, however, and if what you're asking is, I think what you're asking is, would I be able to go ahead and, since I believe I can work with anybody, and I can, then would I be able to go ahead and pick one of your 2? No. That is not the, I think that the 2 are kind of an odd question to ask. Yes, I think anybody who's elected, I can work with them. But if we're making the decision and then you're basing the decision on whether we can work with anybody, and then then should I be able to pick one of your two? I don't think that's really quite a method for us to go forward. Because then I would ask the same thing, if you can work with anybody.
No, I would work with any. That is not what was said tonight. It was.
Oh, I misunderstood
hear-
your question then.
All right, let's have Councilmember Olson have
Maybe
the
she
floor
could
back.
ask it again.
No, it's okay. No, I'm fine. You were clarifying it. It's fine. That's not what I heard to begin with, so that's why I was reiterating it. I heard from two people, not you, saying that they're willing to work with any of these candidates. Whoever is elected by district, if we go to special, I'll work with anybody too. I mean, we have major differences in the 8 years that I've been on council, and we still work together. So that's sort of a moot issue. It's not like I'm going to resign if one of these people wins or something. That's not what this is about for me. So even that was brought up, I'm not sure exactly what the purpose was then otherwise. So I was just asking. So if it's not, no, the issue is I would not agree with any of these candidates if we choose them. You know, you're not saying that all four would be fine. Any of those four would be fine. You're saying you really are committed to the two that you chose. That's helpful to know.
Right, and that, I think that's what I was trying to say, was that what's become very clear to me is that maybe that's kind of what makes our council work a little, is that we all have very fundamental differences on what we view as important, the role of government, the role of this council, and the role of representation. And that's come out with the choices that we made. And if I'm tasked with making the choice, then it is the foundation that I come from, so I'm not going to give up the foundation of who I am, and I doubt that you'll probably give up the foundation of who you are. If you truly believe that the role of government is different than I do, and I think somebody better represents what I believe the representation, the power of the city should be, the responsibility of the city, then it's so fundamental that it's going to be somewhat of a
Yeah, I don't see it as a fundamental. I think I've been mischaracterized quite severely.
Oh, I was characterizing myself. I wasn't characterizing you, but if you believe that, I apologize.
You said earlier, just a little bit ago, that we have the great divide in our perspectives on things in the role of government. I believe in limited government, but I believe in it, and I believe in sound budgets. I don't believe you have to have an accountancy in every candidate in order to do that, though. I think what you need are people who can really understand broad sectors of people, that have backgrounds in understanding how to problem solve together. The fact that we bring up homelessness or anything like this on this council, we're not going to set aside money to do that. I'm not asking for that, but I do believe we have a responsibility every time we get upset about something that happens around homelessness to actually talk about it as a council and figure out what is our responsibility as a city with these citizens, with these residents or people that are in our community, and not just push them into another. I think we got to think about it. So I know those things seem like liberal ideas to some people. To me, they're deep human condition issues that I think we have responsibility for. I'm not going to raise the budget to do that, though. It's not, somehow it gets connected in some people's minds. So I'm looking for breadth and a background that has a variety of understandings and working through differences and getting lots of voices to the table and thinking creatively and innovatively, not with just one solution. Let's cut the budget, let's get it to zero, or let's do this and not approve any more developments. I don't know what either of these candidates would do in that. I'm looking for someone who can think about a lot of different ways of handling things. And that's why, to me, it's not about limited government or more government, which I know has been in the paper. I didn't even read it. Sorry. But it's not that for me at all. It's serving the city the best way we can with someone who has an ability to really go out and seek different perspectives and understand what's happening, and then problem solve with others. Seek them out to problem solve. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Olson. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. And I guess to clarify my point as well, and certainly I'm more than happy to work with any of these candidates, and they do all seem cooperative and amenable to the group, so I would be happy to do so. That is my obligation, is to do my best to work with every candidate. It's not my obligation to just vote for any candidate that seems to have the most support of a fellow council member. I do think we should be voting for the candidate we feel is best and will serve the city best, and that's what I would stand by. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other comments? I would say also, and I agree, I actually agree with both Councilmember Barentine and Councilmember Olson. We do have fundamental differences, basic differences, but I also agree that you are fiscally responsible in what you just shared, that we're not going to go out and spend money on homelessness because we don't have money. We have to find a solution to the problem where it's not, where we're working together and partnering with other people, perhaps the churches in the city. And so we can find a solution for that. But there are fundamental differences between us. And although I could work with any person, I feel compelled that I am supposed to vote for the one that I believe is the strongest candidate. And so if this is where we're at, I mean, I guess this council needs to decide, are we going to continue discussing this, or are we at an impasse, and does it need to go to a special election? The truth is, we will, if it goes to a special election, we will work with a candidate that the citizens elect. And that, I have heard people come to the dais and say, just appoint somebody, we will pay attention, we will hold them accountable, and it's probably, about a year and 10 months before the next election, before they would have to run again. But the truth is, I will stand by the person that I think is the best qualified. So that's where I think that we are at right now. I don't know who was first, Councilmember Quest or Councilmember?
Oh, no, we had a race. I believe I beat him.
Okay, Councilmember Barentine.
We had a question of the special election come up, and I have to defer to some of the people that brought this up to me. It shouldn't be speculative. It is in our charter how exactly that works. It is, I believe, a 90-day process, and so it isn't, I mean, there's rules that govern it. And I don't think that it was meant to misrepresent anything. It was just we asked off the cuff, and it was given some date or something. But there is actually a specific time limit, and that time can't start until our 30 days is up, I believe. I'm not sure, but if that's true, and that it cannot start until then that 90 days would bring it somewhere into April. So. But we would have to defer to the attorney. But I just wanted to clarify that. I don't think when our city manager was asked before that he was expecting to have some date ready for us or anything. So, but it is governed by the charter. It will not be decided by this council. It is in the charter already on how that would be handled and what goes on with that. So just to make that clarification.
Thank you, and I was not implying that, but thank you.
Sorry for trying to race you.
Councilmember Cuesta.
On that same note, you had initially mentioned there was an estimated $15,000 price tag on a special election. Have you received any further information?
Yes, actually we have. Arapahoe County was clearing up things from last November's election, so they finally given us a firmer number. That number is less. It's now $9,000. However, that doesn't include any staff time that would incorporated with the city clerk and her deputy from looking at petitions, working with any candidates that were to file. So there's that time, too, that would be involved. And obviously they didn't anticipate doing an election so early in the year. They anticipated having the election in November. So those things need to be taken into account, too. So the cost is less. I know that attorneys frantically looking at whether or not you have to wait till the 30-day time has expired for you to make a decision. But, you know, that's something to take into account as well. The time frame that the district would be uncovered with not having a representative.
Thank you. Getting procedural then, and maybe those are questions for the city clerk, and let's say it is the 30 days. At that point in time, candidates interested could start collecting their signatures.
Yeah, so if we're moving towards a special election, we would need to prepare the petitions and then set a date for those petitions to be able to start circulation. They would then be circulated for the full 20 days. So we would have to work up the election calendar based on that. So it's our understanding that the deadline for you to be able to appoint someone would be February 7th. And then kind of moving from there, we would then proceed with the special election.
I assume it would be 50 signatures as it is
Correct.
in a typical election.
It's the same process and protocol as the general municipal election. But also there's a lot that goes into an election. It's not just the petitioning, but there's an IGA that needs to be put together with the county and brought forward for 2 readings. I mean, we're going to have to build in some time here. It will take time to pull a special election together. So I just want to make sure are aware of that.
Thank you, City Clerk. Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
It was brought to my attention that the whole of England can do an election in 90 days. Then they're pretty sure we could be able to do that, and I have the confidence, and so I realize that when they do the confidence, that's the only time they have a vote. Glad to hear about the price and that you checked into that, and that the county, and I'm also very glad to hear that we would not attempt to do this ourselves, that we would go ahead and go through, unlike some other local municipalities that have done it differently and paid the price for that, we would go with an agreement with Arapahoe County.
That is always our preference. However, it's always based on the availability of Arapahoe County to be able to help us. So we were thankful to get that response back from Arapahoe County Elections Division saying that they would be willing and available to help us with this, because
kudos for Matt Crane. Good for him.
And let the experts do what they're best at.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
I just had a process question, probably for the city clerk. But so if we end up in a special election, any person from District 1 could apply, right? Not just the folks that we interviewed.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
So yeah, thank you.
Is there any further questions or comments? And I guess one of the questions that I have is everyone firmly set on their candidates? And if we're at an impasse, I do have one question for the city clerk. If we are at an impasse and we gave direction, we voted tonight to move forward, could you go ahead and start getting the paperwork ready, although it wouldn't start happening until the 7th?
Has the attorney answered that it can't happen until the 7th?
The charter actually says that the city council shall select within 30 days. It doesn't refer to what would happen if there was an impasse. It says in another section of the charter that where for issues that the charter does not specifically cover, you revert to state law. The language of our charter is almost, thanks. The language of our charter is almost word for word what the state law is, which makes it very helpful because you can tell that the charter committee pulled this language right out of state law. The only difference between state law and there are 2 small differences, but the major difference between state law and our charter is state law gives city council 60 days before it goes to special election. Our charter just says you shall choose within 30 days. So interpreting that provision in accordance with the other provision that says where applicable state law shall apply, I'm interpreting the charter to be that you have 30 days. You have 30 days to select somebody, and if after 30 days you haven't selected somebody, then it reverts to the rules of state law, which says that it goes to a special election. Again, I don't, as Mayor Pro Tem Russell made a statement, I think it was at the last meeting, that every situation is just enough different that any set of rules is not going to perfectly match it. So I'm going to give you my very best opinion right now based on these 2 provisions of charter, and that would be that you should not open this special election or direct it to special election until the completion of your 30 days. That would be my best interpretation. I need to qualify that. I think that because these two provisions are vague, that you might find an attorney who would say, well, because they're vague, you can just go ahead and go to special election. So I'm going to tell you is, because these two provisions are relatively vague, I think that this is one of those situations where I'm going to give you my best opinion, but you get to make the best choice for the city.
Okay. Thank you. So, Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. And just to address that immediately, I would like to wait out the 30 days. And if that's the case, somebody may have a change of heart, wake up in the middle of the night screaming, whatever the case may be. So we let it run its course, and then I think that gives us a little bit more safety. I'm wondering if we don't actually vote. We're saying we're at an impasse. Do we vote and make it official? I'm happy to motion for a candidate, and we can go down the line on those candidates. And if people don't want to go on the record or don't want to go that far, that's fine as well. But I'm happy to actually cast votes tonight and actually show that we are at an impasse and we've gone on record as such.
Okay, so just a minute. I have another question for the city attorney. If we don't make any decision tonight, can we make a decision on February 5th, or will we need to call a special meeting on the 7th of February because that's the deadline?
You can make this decision at any time within the 30 days. So if it's something that you just want to put on the regular agenda for the 5th, absolutely appropriate to do that. If you decide that you want to set another special election on the 7th to make the decision about impasse, that's fine too. There really is very little binding you to make the best choice for the city at this point in time with this set of facts.
Okay. Councilmember Wink.
Do all the other council members agree with what Councilmember Cuesta said, or do we have other options before we all do that?
Councilmember Martinez.
So I had a question. We have about little over 2 weeks, I think, or so before that time, before our deadline, essentially. And I heard from at least one member of council that they are a little uneasy that we only met with the candidates one time. I don't know if we'd be open to meeting with the candidates again, if that would help us get any closer, but just something that I think we should consider.
Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. If we are going to take our full 30 days, we can have a vote on the final night even, and then say we have reached this impasse. Then again, people might have a change of heart between now and then. So I'm happy to withdraw that suggestion and bypass on a vote tonight. Perhaps bring folks in again, however you guys want to approach it. But I am willing to withdraw that suggestion of voting tonight. Certainly if we're going to wait out the 30 days. There's no need to go on record now then.
Councilmember Barentine.
How would we? It's not my intent. If we're going to go ahead and we have this impasse, then I would rather people were just prepared. Maybe people that hadn't even applied to go ahead and start moving forward. It's not my intent to just go ahead and torture either the candidates or ourselves, because I think we have some legitimate division in where we're going with this. So I would prefer that we not go ahead and have a second round unless somebody can really give me a little bit more information on what they hope to garner for that, or what you think is going to change in what we've already expressed is going on here, how we're going to pursue this, that it would be a fruitful use of our time.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Olson.
Yeah, my bringing this up just highlights a regret that I've been sensing in the last several weeks, that I would never hire somebody where we hadn't had a second go around. And I, too, unless we really think that we possibly could see some things that some of us be willing to change our minds on, that it's probably not worth putting people through it, because if we come to an impasse again, they still have to go through another process, and to put them through it twice doesn't seem fair. However, I would like to suggest that if we go ahead, if we're going to not do a second kind of meeting with them, that we vote tonight and give everybody the opportunity to know we've decided to go to a special election. Gives everybody more chance, more time to think about whether they want to run or not, gives the city some time to work on some things, and then we can move forward with a little bit more of a couple-week breather for this. And it would help alleviate us from this angst about it all, and we can focus on other things for the city in the meantime. Just seems more reasonable to me.
I actually agree with that. I don't really want to put the candidates through it again, and really ourselves, if it's not going to make any difference. And I agree that we probably should go ahead and vote tonight, so there is on the record that we truly are impassed. Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
Councilmember Olson, I greatly appreciate you clarifying that the way that you did. I just think you stated it very well. I don't think that a second interview type process is going to be a deciding factor for me. I do agree. I've fired and unfortunately fired hundreds of people in my career, and it is a difficult process. But there is a consensus and a mission and an understanding more, and not necessarily usually the division on the company or organization on exactly what they're looking for to fill that position or how they're going to fill that. So while I appreciate your expertise and your experience in that, as I have had, that I don't see that I'm going to get that from a second round of interviews in the way that we've been doing it already. And I do think it's only fair, not only to the people that have applied, but people that may wish to go ahead and do this, who have not applied into this process, to go ahead and make a decision of whether they want to pursue this or not. So I would prefer to go with Councilmember Quest's first gut feeling to go ahead and at least, and I do appreciate the significance of that, of at least making sure that the community knows that we are in an impasse with a vote.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
Thanks. Two things. One is my regret about not having 2 times with them would have been before we came to this decision. And so I think in the books, if we could pencil in maybe some guidelines for the next time this might have to happen in the city, that perhaps we could be a council that breathes into the future saying, you know, if you're going to do this in another election or another situation in the future, that we would recommend that we set up more than one experience with them. I realize the last time that was 20-some, so it's probably seemed impossible, but that we at least make a note. It might be wise to have in considering your timing and the schedule. It's tough because it's a quick turnaround, but with only 8 candidates, 7 candidates at the end, we could have done another one, but we didn't, and that's not anyone's fault. It's just looking back on it now, it's the same hindsight thing. The other piece, suggestion I would make is that tonight we not vote against any candidate, that rather we vote for going to a special election so that none of us are giving a negative vote to anyone. I think we've stated our terms. We already know what everybody thinks. Why should any of us have to push a button to say no, they might be elected and we're going to work with them, right? So let's just decide to go to
information. Are you asking that we only vote for a special election
Right.
or not a special election?
Right.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting.
No,
And then so what you're saying is that if we vote for a special election, that would be admitting that we are at an impasse. Mm-hmm. So when we vote yes on sending it to a special election, so when the motion gets made, could that be included in the motion? Do we need to have for the record that we are at an impasse?
That would be a good idea. To give you a little more confidence, because I was I was advising you earlier without having pulled up the statute. I just could not get my hands on it. I told you that our charter almost mirrors the language of the state statute, but the state statute has the 60 days instead of the 30 days. The state statute also uses the word shall. Within 60 days after a vacancy occurs in the council shall appoint a person or order an election to be held as soon as practicable. If you are a split council at impasse and we are going to the language of the statute to clarify the process, that the state statute seems to justify declaring an impasse at this point, if that's what you would care to do, and directing the city manager to begin the process of a special election. Does that help?
For now. Thank you. Councilmember Cuesta.
And I'm happy to reintroduce the suggestion that we vote tonight. And I can certainly get behind just voting for or against holding a special election as well.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
I would like to second Linda, Councilmember Olson's
She hasn't
motion.
made the motion yet, but she's going
she
to,
did.
right?
She said
I will.
She said it so well, and it was her idea, and I respect, I respect where you're going with that and the reasoning that behind it. I do respect that.
So I'm
Yes.
willing to,
Councilmember Olson.
to move, since the city council is at an impasse in appointing someone into District 1 to serve the remainder of the term, that we move towards a special election and call upon our staff to set that up for us, for the city.
I'd second.
You have the wording, right?
Make it more eloquent than I did.
I would, however, ask Councilmember Olson if, since Councilmember Cuesta already brought up that he would like to see us at least go through the 30 days because of the long explanation that the city attorney gave before, that we stick with that and that the date for the process to begin would be on February 7th.
Sure, and I think that's wise because it does give us more time, it gives people more time to think about doing this, so which is better in the long run for the district. So add that date
It's up
in.
to the clerk now.
So, are you raising your hand?
Yes, this time I am.
Okay.
I had a shoulder. Just a question for clarification, too. Obviously, this funding is not in the budget currently to have 2 elections this year. We can deal with that separately, but don't forget that issue. We'll probably have to come back and either ask for a supplemental appropriation for election or deal with that sometime later in the year.
Well, we have a motion on the table.
And
that isn't part
can I ask that question now, too? Because I had a suggestion before that I shared with a few people, is that...
Point of order, we have a motion on the table.
Right.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
And a second.
City Clerk, would you
discussion
read...
is now about this.
Right.
But we can ask that question, can't we? No?
Okay. For right now, there is a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Olson?
So I guess I will bring up the question then. It's now the time then to ask, how are we going to fund this? And we could approve this and then not have the funding. So that I think we're going to find the funding. There's a commitment to do this and find the funding. It's really quite small compared to what I thought it would be. But, in the eyes of others, it may not seem like that. I just charge the judge for it. No. Doesn't District 1 have a budget for this? No, I'm fine with, I don't have any other questions.
All right. So it's been moved and seconded. Would the City Clerk please read the motion?
Can't wait for this.
It's been moved by Councilmember Olson and seconded by Councilmember Barentine to declare an impasse. I have it written down, but let's see. Split council at impasse on the appointment of a District 1 representative, and that we're declaring an impasse and directing the staff to begin the process of a special election.
On
Process to begin. I would imagine that the 7th was thrown out. Is that correct, or do you want that?
Maybe we just say 30 days within the, at the end of the 30-day time period, which you'll figure out what date that is. I don't know, what does it
Right.
help
Hour
you?
and minute, yeah.
Right. Okay.
And once the 30-day appointment process is over, correct?
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
So I do have a question about what happens between now and then. Can you start working on it?
Yes.
You can. And then can we get the word out that starting on whatever February date
Actually,
or do we not? I mean, this is
we need
public.
to
We already.
Yeah, we need to publicly notice this, and there's a lot.
Because when we
Election
ran.
notice and that type of thing. So
Yeah.
we can begin the back end work, but if you're formally putting a date on it, then we wouldn't be able to notice it and that type of thing
Until that date.
I would refer to the city attorney for some help on that as well.
So I guess my question is, I mean, we knew when we ran that, there was a certain deadline coming up that if we wanted to do it, we had to do it by then. Wouldn't that just be the same with this? You can't do anything until that date, but at least gives you, that, I might think about running.
The nice thing about setting this information out now is while there's no formal action, there is a lot of behind-the-scenes work that has to be done, and you're letting us know to go ahead and get started on the behind-the-scenes work. You're also notifying the public, get ready to watch, because on this day, we're kicking this into gear. So there's a lot that will happen between now and then, even though that's the formal date.
Okay. That answers my question.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Speaking of the behind-the-scenes kind of work that needs to go on for an election, I assume that also entails getting the election commission involved?
We would not need to get the election commission involved unless there were decisions on process or policy that needed to be made, but a special election is fairly straightforward as far as we can tell for candidates, and we have that process in place, and now we would be coordinating with the county.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Berentine.
It is the exact time frame for the election, municipal election every time. So everybody is quite competent in what they do for the county and for our staff, and they know how to run elections. When we do the petitions, you do the petition, and it's the first week of August that you can start getting signatures. You may have decided to run it before that, or maybe not. Plenty of candidates to here didn't decide until after that date to go ahead and run, which actually gave you less than the 90 days to go ahead and do that. So quite honestly, all of this is all in the normal time frame of the election, and everybody is very capable and competent of doing this within the time frame. This isn't rushed. It isn't sooner than any other process would be. So the same amount of signatures, the same kind of process. It just seems different when you're going from summer, and by the time the election happens, it's like snowing. But now it'll be snowing and it'll be warmer. But it is exactly the same time frame. So it's not something that puts an additional burden necessarily. It's the same process you're used to. It's just an additional one.
Correct. And just to clarify, we absolutely would get the election commission involved if we were going to run this special election on our own. But if we're coordinating with the county and there's not any policy or process decisions that need to be made, then we wouldn't necessarily need to involve the election commission.
Thank you. Councilmember Cuesta.
There's certainly the public notification. I have a feeling word of mouth will spread on this pretty quickly as well and move throughout the community. As you mentioned, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes campaigning. I can see folks already preparing campaign, even letting people know that they intend to run. Is our prohibition on communication with these folks still in place throughout the 30 days?
Absolutely not.
Or is it off after this point? And I think this is a council question, not so much a staff question.
I think my feeling, once we vote on this motion, the direction has already been determined, and if people want to speak to us, that the prohibition is over. I mean,
We made our decision.
right.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
I was just going to say, I'm sure we're already going to do this, but are we going to notify by email or phone call the folks who, already applied, even those that dropped out? Okay.
Yeah. All seven.
All seven, yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Berentine.
I hope, like every other election, municipal election, that they have the opportunity and right to come and address council, redress, undress council, whatever they want to do. Then this becomes whatever issues or whatever campaign they're doing. So I think that it just makes it open. It's just a regular election piece, and there isn't any restriction on a council person for that. So
Very good.
or them to come and talk, or any other members of the community.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is to go to a special election, and this is the council is at an impasse, and we are ordering city staff to go to a special election in the 30-day time frame. So please vote.
All votes have been cast. Let the record show.
We cannot abstain from this vote, I do not believe, Mayor.
No member may abstain from a vote unless they have a financial or other stated conflict of interest.
Okay, so we have to take the vote again.
Yeah.
All votes have been cast. Let the record show. 5 ayes and 1 nay, the 1 nay being Councilmember Wink.
Can we discuss the other thing about funding tonight, or do we need we can?
It is a special meeting. I'm not sure that.
Okay, we will wait till the 5th of February.
Wait a minute. Point of information.
Okay.
I don't want any one council member to decide what we can or can't do if we think it's legal or illegal. It got brought up. Is it even possible to talk about it, or is it not?
One person isn't deciding. I asked the
focus.
question.
The statement on your agenda was to discuss the selection of a council member for District 1. And I do think that discussing the budgetary ramifications of going to a special election are outside of the scope of the way you stated for this special election.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. We will discuss this at the next council meeting. This meeting is adjourned.
Bring up a question. I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's fine.
I'm not deciding. I was just bringing up a question. Okay. I think it was more. It wasn't very.
It was more your than going with it. It was like, okay, it wasn't you.
It wasn't. It wasn't fair. I don't think it was fair to.